So, in the month of November, I am interviewing men about men's issues because I think that those issues impact all of us. And so that's really why I'm doing this. It's in the lead up to International Men's Day, which, by the way, we are recording on International Men's Day. It's today, even though this won't come out until later in the month. And for Movember, which is all about kind of raising awareness for men's physical health, but also mental and behavioral health. And so today I'm talking to Alex, who I've never met in person. So, so that's super exciting. Alex, why don't I know you from TikTok, so that's really where I've seen you and where we've interacted. I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll dive in and talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Alex, qualified psychotherapist for 4 years now. Been working with children, teenagers, adults for a good 10 to 15 years in a different range of settings involving secondary schools, primary schools, youth clubs, etc. And to be honest with you, I came across TikTok as a platform only a couple of years ago. It was introduced to me by a friend who said that they thought I might be able to spread some awareness. To begin with, it was meant to be involving relationships,
Yeah.
and then I was exposed to certain types of content which pushed out a rhetoric. Might be familiar with the sort of terminology of red pill movement or
Yes.
content, let's say, which I deemed to be quite harmful.
Yeah.
And I wanted clarification with my friend because oftentimes there were things I heard where I thought some of the things that are said here made a bit of sense, but then what the follow up was didn't, and I was a bit
Yeah.
confused. And I think for me, part of my journey of raising awareness was also becoming more self-aware of certain misogynistic beliefs that I might have had and held on to that I needed to unpack.
Yeah.
And then that kind of drifted into raising awareness for things that encapsulated how the patriarchy is formed, and one of the ways that men suffer under that as well is in that mental health industry, I'd say, in
Yeah.
terms of how that affects men and their belief systems towards mental health in itself.
Yeah. That's so interesting. It's funny you say that because I like there is so much happening on TikTok, and some of it's just like, oh, that's just gross and dirty, right? It's just like it feels hard. But I similar to what you said, I think in spending time there and participating in some of the conversations and just sort of following some of this, it's made me more aware and more willing to actually speak up. Like I have been a woman in a male dominated industry my whole life, right? I was 21 when I went into tech, right? And so this was years ago. And so but I think I had sort of thought, well, I'm doing my part. I don't
Yeah.
need to do anything else. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. I think there's more to be said, right? Which is part of the reason I decided to do this is that I want, I think I have some space in my kind of network in my space. I'm respected for what I've done, but I also think that there's a conversation to be had here that needs to be a safe conversation. So
Mhm.
I'm really curious. Like I ran into you. I want to bring up one topic where is actually where I first found you, which is sort of the man versus bear one. But I want to table that for a second. I want to talk about. I know you do these men's mental health kind of check-ins.
Yeah, yeah.
What drew you to that? I mean, obviously, I know you're understanding your background, but what drew you to that, and what do you feel like you're learning and seeing in those spaces?
Okay, so the job that I have, majority of my clients are young men.
Okay.
And there's a certain theme that I've noticed around ways that they support themselves,
Mhm.
attitudes and beliefs towards the world and
Yeah.
relationships. Probably the main things, money as well, but not as much as the others. But they're probably the main factors around what is contributing to their mental health maybe not being where they'd like it to be.
Yeah.
So part of me thought, you know what, my TikTok journey, I'm going to do my videos, which challenges other behaviors of men, but I'm going to do lives, which is in support of men's mental health, because I want to show a balance. I want to show that you can advocate for more than one thing, even if it looks like you might be trying to challenge men in one way, but then also support them in another. Um, so that's what I did. I started doing the mental health lives. They'd begun to be for everyone.
Mhm.
And then on some days, I thought I would do one for men specifically
Right.
because some of the themed comments that you would get was men coming in and saying, oh, women don't care about men's mental health. Men
Right.
don't care about men's mental health. No one listens to us, etc. And there
Yeah.
was this constant narrative always being mentioned.
Mhm.
And I thought, fine, I'll provide a space for that. And after I'd say about maybe 2 or 3 months of just doing general mental health lives,
Yeah.
same people were coming back.
Yeah.
So when I went live, you would get a good 20 to 25 people who were always there, same people, but they created a safe environment with me,
Mm.
knowing that anybody's, emotions to share would be welcomed.
Yeah.
And I think that, slowly you started to see some men expressing a little bit of vulnerability, some because they didn't feel they had anywhere else to go and they
Yeah.
just stumbled across the live at the right time and thought, do you know what, I just need to get this off my chest. And you know, when there was positive experiences from that and they also came back, it was just nice to see them growing along with the platform.
Yeah.
So there was, of course, a good feeling that people were coming into my life to listen to me,
Yeah.
but at the same time, that's part of, you know, the reward is seeing the change that people make and the journey they go on.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much where my TikTok journey began for the mental health lives.
Yeah. Do you feel like I've obviously been to a few of those across, sometimes I catch them, sometimes I don't, but do you feel like that it is when you're having them, when you're hosting them, is it primarily men that are there? Are there some women that are there to observe? Like, what do you think the mix is on what you see?
The majority are women, but that's mainly because my platform was built to begin with on tackling misogyny.
Yeah.
So I think when a lot of women see a man raising an awareness and being an ally,
Yeah.
they are obviously like, yes, this is someone that we want to follow, to see his content, to push it out,
Yeah.
because there was a common also narrative of men will listen to men more than they will women
Yeah.
on these matters.
Yeah.
So when I then did the lives, I think what was great about it was to actually demonstrate that these women were also in support of the same thing,
Yeah.
which was brilliant. The issue, however, at times was that men would come in and they would see that the chat is quite heavily dominated by women.
Right.
And that would maybe be a bit intimidating, depending on also what experiences they've had in relationships with women. That could be maybe triggering, who knows?
Yeah.
But at the same time, certain things that you can't control.
Yeah.
So I do my best to just provide the space, ensure that the people in it are being respectful to whoever
Right.
comes up on the platform and talks.
Right.
And similarly to people who want, you're always going to get some trolls that come in
Oh,
and
yeah.
just get you straight away.
Yeah.
So, you know, the point is that we're targeting those that actually want to try, that want
Yeah.
to open up and be like, do you know what, if this is an opportunity here where I could try it and I could go offline and it never happened,
Yeah.
let's see how it goes. So it's
And I
almost like an
think,
introduction.
yeah, and I think one of the things that I think is really interesting to watch happen is as you make that space, I think sometimes what I've noticed is even fairly quiet people who maybe aren't really coming forward and saying, I want to share my thoughts, when a troll shows up or someone comes in, they just sort of in the comments try to tackle it and move it on, right? Like they're just like, no, we're not doing that, right? So that you stay more free to do what you're doing,
Yeah.
which I think is really interesting because you can watch men and women, but I think it's really powerful when men say, yeah, we're not doing that here,
And
to another man.
absolutely. Mooney, for
So,
example, who's one
yeah,
of my moderators, you know, he's in there always protecting the live. But not just that, I think there's a lot of people that just sit in the background listening.
yeah,
They
yeah,
don't always need to be messaging and coming
right,
up onto the box to talk. They're
yeah,
just, and I can see that. I can see in the viewers list how long people have kind of been sitting around for.
yeah,
So I'm always checking, and I'm aware of some people,
yeah,
knowing that they've just kind of been listening to whatever comes out. And I think some people will take a lot from that as well because they don't feel like the spotlight's on them. But it might be that, you know what, someone might bring up anxiety and they might go, oh, this is actually something that might help me,
yeah,
and then I'm just going to listen. No different to a podcast, no different to an
sure,
audiobook, whatever it might be.
sure,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, so I think there's a lot of that as well.
And I think for me, like there have been times when I've come just put it on while I'm cooking dinner or whatever I'm doing, and it's just something where I can listen to the perspectives and I can be like, oh yeah, I've met that guy before, but then to hear sort of the way you have the conversation or others that bring their insights, like sometimes it's just like, okay, there is a way to talk about this, right? Because
Mhm.
I think so for those of us who don't have your background or don't do what you're doing, sometimes we're just like, I don't know what I would say, like, in these certain circumstances. And so I think it can be helpful. So I'm throwing that out there to others who are watching this. Like, it can be helpful just to pay attention and watch and see, like, oh, okay, there is a way to hold your boundaries and ground while having a hard conversation with someone and holding space for them.
Yeah.
Right.
And as difficult as that might be, I think a lot of the times in therapy, when you get people, or therapeutic talk, let's say, when you get people saying, I need some advice, and immediately it's the difference of understanding that, as therapists, we don't give advice, we
Right.
kind of guide, we offer
Right.
perspectives, to sort of suggest what could be done that
Yeah.
suits your circumstance without knowing all the details.
Yeah.
But a lot of people do like it when you start using dialogue, and sort of saying, have you tried wording it this way? Have you
Yeah.
tried, and finding out how people do talk to others first, and then saying, right, what would it look like if you worded it like this?
Yeah.
And how that can reduce the heat with some difficult
Yeah.
conversations amongst friends and family and
Yeah, I mean,
relationships.
even I'm a leadership coach and an executive coach, and one of the things I tell my clients all the time is like, lead with curiosity, ask a question. You don't always have to have an opinion. You don't always have to have an answer. Ask them a question and see what they tell. It's just data. Get some more
Yeah.
information, right? And if what they tell you can lead you in a direction, like I get a lot of my clients that are like, "Oh, I don't know what to do when this conflict arises," and I'm like, you don't have to do anything. Just ask a
Mm,
question. Be
yeah.
curious, right? And I think for me, even in these conversations I've been having, I think what has been surprising to some of the men, these are again, most of them are my friends or people I know, men that I've worked with, that kind of thing. I think they're sort of surprised that I'm asking them questions about this, and they're like, I don't know, no one's ever asked me this before, and I'm like, yeah, it's helpful to have someone ask you a question you've never been asked before.
Yeah, it gets you thinking and it gets you
Yeah,
exploring. And when you're put on the spot, yes, there could be so many different answers that come to your mind, and you don't know whether you're tapping into vulnerability, whether you're deflecting, getting defensive, being challenged, whatever it might be. But you're right. I think those difficult conversations amongst men in friendship groups are not really had often.
yeah,
And I think that's why when you come to these spaces, and a lot of them are about challenging men's behaviors, challenging their perspectives,
yeah,
I would say as a default, not many men like being challenged,
right,
because it comes from an ego state of, oh, this is something that is not familiar to me. And so it's quite easy to deflect or avoid from that stance
hmm,
and then derail onto something different.
yeah,
Now in therapy, it's very much like, okay, bring it back.
yeah,
Obviously, we're not therapy, but
yeah,
if I was in a session with a client and I could see they were doing that, I'd say, bring it back.
yeah,
Like, we'll go on to that after, but bring it back to the main point, because the point of it is, if it's making you feel uncomfortable in some way, some sort of emotion is being triggered, and your go-to is to get away from it, then you're deflecting rather than saying, actually, all this is an uncomfortable feeling.
yeah,
It's not dangerous. It's not going to harm you. It's just not pleasant.
yeah,
So let's sit together with that. Like, I'm here,
yeah,
and it's almost like holding their hand along the way
yeah,
without literally doing it. And I
yeah,
think they don't realize that the first thing that comes to their mind is, oh gosh, this sounds like I'm being weak.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, this sounds like I'm being perceived as weak, or a child, maybe.
right,
The whole holding hand. And like you say, then they run because they're just like, no, 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 this isn't for me.
yeah,
And the reason it isn't for them most of the time is because they might be 20 years old, 40 years old,
yeah,
and it's never happened before.
right, right. They've
Never
never seen
had
it
that.
modeled. They've never done it. They've
Yeah.
never had anybody do it with them. So yeah,
Or if they ever did, and the situation was maybe used against them in terms
yeah,
of their feelings,
yeah,
or if they had the opportunity and it got shut down, almost
hmm,
like a rejection,
hmm, hmm,
then yes, there's hostility towards that, and thinking, I've been here before and it just doesn't work
yeah,
you know
yeah. No, totally. Well, and I mentioned at the top of the conversation, like, I think the first time I ever ran across you on TikTok, you were having one of these man versus bear conversations, which was obviously like,
Yeah.
it was
That was
nuts.
that
Last
was the
summer was
first time my
crazy.
lives went. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was the first time my
yeah,
lives went wild, because I
yeah,
it ended up being over like 300 people watching, and I just thought, oh my goodness, what's going on?
yeah, yeah.
um yeah.
So maybe for those who don't know this, because there are quite a few that don't, maybe describe like what that topic was, how it came up, and what your experience of it was, because I think it is
Okay.
really fascinating.
Okay, so the man versus bear topic was actually asked by a man.
Yeah,
So when a lot of men sort of say, women say this, women say it's like, yes, but a man actually gave the hypothetical, which
right,
was, if you were in the woods, would you rather come across a bear or a man?
right,
Um, and a lot of women answered bear,
yeah,
and because a lot of women understood the reasons why, it blew up by them all giving their responses and their reasons. And that was an opportunity for men to think, why are women choosing a bear over a man in that situation?
right,
But instead, the pushback was instantly, you're illogical.
yeah,
This makes no sense, and this is why we don't listen to women.
right,
So the opportunity for empathy, curiosity, your word,
yeah,
for example,
yeah,
wasn't there.
right,
And instead, what ended up happening was, and I will go into detail about the analogy, but instead, what happening as a response to that was men started coming up with their own analogies and
yeah,
saying, would you rather share your feelings with a tree or a woman?
right. I
The
remember
point
that
they were
one.
trying,
Yes.
yeah, so the point they were trying to make was, we get hurt too,
Yeah,
which is usually a lot of men's pushback, is
yeah,
that if women are talking about something that's affecting them, men automatically go, yeah, but we go through things as well.
yeah,
And I always use the bottle analogy, which I don't know if you've seen me use before, where I have two bottles and I say, this is the bottle we're talking about,
yeah,
and what you're doing is you're bringing this bottle in.
Yeah.
This bottle is important. It's
Yeah.
just not the focus of the conversation today. So we're going to put it aside. And if you want to go and talk about that bottle, I'll come and support you because I agree that's important. But we're focusing on this here.
Yeah. No,
So
totally.
it's like a way of recentering it back to men.
Yeah.
So the point of the analogy is to help men understand that men are not walking around the streets with a green or red light above their head.
Right.
So it's not to say that every individual man is dangerous or harmful.
Right.
It's
Right.
just to say that women don't know which ones.
Right.
So men being so, focused on statistics and numbers and saying not that many men harm women, they don't look at the bigger picture
Right.
in the sense that, you know, it's not about the individual man that we're talking to in that moment.
Yeah.
It's more, I could say to people in my life, do you think I'm a nice person? And they'll say, yeah.
Yeah, you're
And then I'll
great.
say, do you think I'm capable of causing harm?
Right.
And they'll also say yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, it happens with family members, it happens with friends,
Yeah.
happens with strangers. That they're all among us.
Yeah.
And the issue is that because we don't know which ones, it's women are wary, they're cautious around men.
Yeah.
They also failed to understand that instantly the response that they gave about the bear versus man being illogical was they went straight to violence.
Yeah.
They went straight to how the bear would, unalive you just instantly.
Yeah.
And not really understanding that there's a lot of women out there, given the choice of that versus SA or what else men could do,
Yeah.
would rather that be a possibility of the two, being it's that or they leave us alone.
100%. Yeah, I
So
mean, I think one of the things that was really poignant to me was when women started talking about like the just saying things like the bear won't take me somewhere else, right? The bear won't do this and then follow. The bear's not going to hold me captive. If it's going to kill me, it's just going to kill me, right? Or it's going to maim me, it's going to maim me, but it's not going to break me down across time so that it can kill me, right? Or
keep me
harm me.
focused.
Exactly. I think one of the things that came out of that for me, there's this Margaret Atwood quote that I think about a lot, which is men are afraid of women laughing at them and women are afraid of men killing them.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds extreme, but what I kind of have come to, so I'm curious what you think about this, but where my head has been about that as we've done these lives and I've listened to these conversations and I've talked to men, is that I don't know that either side takes the other side's position seriously. I think a lot of men are like, yeah, women, it's dangerous for women, but not the women in my life. My women are safe. The women I know aren't in danger. My neighborhood's safe, etc. So it's not serious. Meanwhile, the women in your life are in danger. Maybe not by you, but they're in danger in the world. And then I think on the flip side, and maybe for this conversation more importantly, when men are afraid of rejection or being laughed at or being left out or being denied or dismissed or disrespected, women are sort of like, well, you're not going to die. Nobody dies from that. And so it then is seen as being dismissed. And so it's safer to talk to a tree, right? Because we're like, oh, you'll be fine, right? When I think that what we've seen, this election results, what we've seen with the red pill community, men are not fine when they are rejected or fear rejection. So I'm curious what you think about that.
No, I agree. I agree with the fact that, rejection is an interesting one for men because there's something about it that almost is so powerful
Yeah.
that the ego does respond at times in a dangerous way,
Yeah.
but also maybe from a place of entitlement,
Hmm.
as if like the woman shouldn't be rejecting me.
Right.
So I won't go too much into detail of
Yeah.
stories and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think also what men don't realize is that actually there's so many emotions that we experience.
Yeah.
And I think that because the default is anger as a way of expressing, if you had anger and sadness in a room and you were to walk into it to see which one you wanted to go up to and maybe give time to, sadness always wins.
Yeah.
Because anger is deemed at times scary. It is like potentially dangerous. You don't know how anger is going to be.
Yeah.
Whereas sadness seems to be just purely, I can sit with sadness.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that men always act out on anger, but I think that is a clear example of something that you do see a lot of men, their emotions building because they've suppressed it for so long and it comes out explosive.
Yeah.
And it's because I don't think men have had the opportunity, maybe the right experiences around them, people, to express the emotions that lead up to that explosive moment where it's like, actually, I can't take this anymore.
Mm.
This does need to come out somehow.
Yeah.
And I think that starts with, as you mentioned earlier, parenting as one of them,
Mm-hmm.
friendship groups.
Mm-hmm.
And usually men will go into relationships before realizing that they've, not actually learned how to manage or regulate their emotions.
Yeah.
And so it does play out in relationship dynamics.
Yeah, for sure.
It plays out in ways actually that's not always aggressive, but more so from a protective stance where they don't need to protect themselves, but they feel they have to.
Yeah.
So the typical, man goes to work, has an extremely, extremely tough day. And maybe something happened where he's like, actually, I feel quite anxious at the moment about whether or not my job's secure. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then they come home and on their way home, they're contemplating whether to say anything. And they don't, because they think, I don't want to worry my partner.
Right.
And I also don't want her to see me vulnerable because she'll see me as weak.
Right.
Or she might use it against me. So logically, it's not logically, it's just this is the logic they use,
Yeah.
is I'll keep it to myself and I'll just make sure that everything's okay.
Yeah.
But everything's not okay. That's
Not
the
okay.
problem.
Yeah.
So they come home, suppress it, and then maybe when they come home, maybe something's happened with his partner's day and she offloads because she's like, great, he's home, I can talk to him about it, right?
Yeah.
Tells him everything, and now he's taking that on top of his own problems as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And she doesn't realize because the communication's not there.
Yeah.
And if it is there, it goes as far as, are you okay? You seem a bit down today. Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Conversation done.
Yeah. So totally.
And men talk like that to men a lot of the time as well.
Yeah.
How you doing? Yeah, it's been a rough week. Come on then, let's go get a pint, or let's
Right. Let's watch the game.
have a laugh.
Right.
Yeah, let's watch a game. Let's have a laugh. Take your mind off it. Let's take your mind off it.
Yeah.
And this whole take your mind off it is great for a temporary distraction.
Yeah.
But if you're then going to leave it in that box and never go back to the box,
Yeah.
then imagine you have like a bookshelf, and you're just putting boxes in, but you're never taking them out.
Right.
Eventually it's going to fall. It's going to
fall down. Yeah. No, it's a good point. And it's interesting as you're talking, I'm thinking like in my relationships, I've certainly seen this with my partners, but also with the men in my work life, my male friends. I think that the idea that I won't tell you this thing, hey partner, I'm not going to tell you this thing because I don't want to worry you. I don't want you to carry that load. What I think we fail to understand when we do that is that the person's going to carry the load one way or the other because that pile up is going to put some load on that person. So why not unpack it while it's fresh and you can actually see if there's something you can do with it, not necessarily help, but hold it together. And then maybe it doesn't build up where then the load buries this person and they want to get away from you. Right?
Absolutely.
Because now you're angry, or now you're quiet, or now you're sullen, or you're hang out in your basement playing video games all day, and I don't want to be with that person. I want to be with someone who talks to me, right? And I think that some of it just is, and I'm not making excuses for women, but I think there is a buildup that happens, right? And so the load is coming for your partner either way if you don't unpack it. And so your protection of that person is not really protection. It's the same, I had that happen in work situations where a CEO will be like, I'm not telling anybody this, and they don't tell you, they don't tell you, they don't tell you. And then pretty soon I've got to carry the load of whatever you didn't solve. And I've got to go figure out how to solve that problem on a much bigger scale but we could have talked about it 6 months ago. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's also men feeling like they have to protect themselves from their partner.
Yeah.
And I always say that even before you get to a relationship situation, right, you need to learn how to manage, regulate, and communicate your emotions before going into a relationship.
Yeah.
And a lot of men think that they already know how to do that, and they don't. And it's not, again, this is not an attack on them. It's an explanation that actually, it's something that's working on the self that you will bring to the relationship regardless. If you haven't worked on yourself, you're still bringing you to the relationship. So this then falls into dating, which is when you go dating, what questions are you actually asking the person opposite you?
Right.
I would say a lot of men kind of fall to, if they want to be intimate with me, the date's gone well.
Yeah.
Intimacy could be any level. It can even just be a kiss. It doesn't have to be all the way, but in any kind of way, if there's intimacy on the date, men will go home and go, that was a good date. That was successful. Why? Because she's demonstrated an interest on not a friendship level. There's something more that can be here. Cool. And then what happens is men will go away and think, right, all I need to do really is just kind of be the same as I was on that date. Because, maybe I was funny, charismatic. Maybe I was, flirting a little bit and it was well met.
Yeah.
And then if I do that again, who knows? Like we'll ask a few more questions here and there, and get to know each other on a different level. And the reason I don't say deeper level is because men don't talk about those deep emotional questions,
Right.
which give you an indication as to whether or not this person can be someone in the future
Right.
who you can open up to,
Right.
and not have to carry that burden we spoke of earlier of, all of this is going on today. I'm not going to tell her. No, actually, I'm going to tell her because I want to hope that she'll support me.
Yeah, let's see how she behaves in this scenario, right? When I have a
Yeah,
hard day, because I'm going to have other hard days in life, right?
exactly. And I don't want to have to suppress all that,
Yeah,
because what have we seen with men that suppress? Suicide rates are at the highest.
yeah, yeah,
Mental health is not cheap to access. The
right.
NHS waiting list for therapy is 6 to 9 months, maybe longer, depending on what it is you need support from.
Yeah,
Support with, sorry. So there's so much that does go against men in that sense.
right, right.
And if you look at the world, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, compared to, where we are now, what was it, maybe like 30 years ago, the internet was, like spoken of rather than actually created, maybe 20. So you look at what the internet has brought in
Yeah,
terms of social media, news, dating, absolutely everything.
yeah,
To have that in such a short span of development,
yeah,
the world has grown at an extremely fast pace.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
think in the emotional capacity, men haven't maybe tapped into that field that they needed to, because society is almost showing men that you need to be a certain way in this world.
Yeah. And there hasn't been enough evolution time, right? And
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
across that window. And unfortunately, as evolution does, it often goes to the lowest common denominator. And so the red pill guys get louder and that noise gets bigger and bigger. And you start to miss the ability to evolve up
Yeah.
towards the greater good. One of my friends the very first interview I released in the series, he said, the world has changed and is changing fast and is changing rapidly. Men have not. And I was like,
Well, yeah. Sums it up. Yeah.
that's not okay, right? But I understand his perspective, right? Like,
It does sum it up. I agree. I think, for example, when going on dating, I think women are looking for more than just, can you provide and protect? And I will say that because I just don't agree with the concepts of both.
yeah,
But that's what it used to be like, I suppose.
yeah,
In terms of also now the choice, the independence, things that women are now able to do that they weren't because of, well, oppressive
because of
stances,
how
let's
it
say.
worked, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and now, it's like, if you want to live in this world and have a family, the majority of the time you need two household incomes,
Yeah, yeah,
to be able to afford that. So again, women are now working, and so when women go working and they come home, are women also now doing everything at home on top, or
yeah,
are men now joining in doing the
right,
household chores?
right.
It's true, men need to adapt and men need to change.
Yeah.
And it's not to say this in a way that women are perfect. No
No,
one's.
no, of course not. Of
We
course
all
not.
have areas that we need to
Yeah,
work on.
yeah,
But I think when men talk about the areas that they're suffering in,
yeah,
I do agree with that statement. Have men caught up to the world that we live in today in comparison?
yeah.
And I think that men are a bit behind on that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to do this is that I recognize in myself, having, as I mentioned to you, like I spent this long career in tech, and, I've had a really successful career in that space. And I realized over the last few years that I had gotten really armored up, like around men. And so I was like, nope, this wall is high to climb. Get four ladders, right? Because I'm not interested. Like I'm not putting up with the nonsense. If I have to put up with it out in my career world and my work life, I'm not doing it at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
And part of what I recognized was that wall and that coldness, that armor, was actually pushing men further away from me and making me madder at them. Like I was getting angrier and angrier and angrier at the behavior I saw, but I was also not inviting any sort of conversation or like, hey, let me tell you what I see, and I'd be happy to take that in response, right? And so part of that was why this was important to me. Meanwhile, I have amazing male friends, I have amazing male colleagues that I love being around and working with, but I recognized that there was an anger brewing, a rage brewing in me, and I think, listen, menopausal women, we were like, oh, all the rage I've ever had is now here. Right? Because I haven't gotten to work it out. Now I can, right?
Yeah.
So now I have the money and the power and the autonomy to be like, ready? Ready for
Here
my
it is. Here it is.
there it is. Right. And I don't want to live like that. I don't want to be that kind of person. Right. But it was funny, the one of the things that came to my mind when in the midst of sort of this man versus bear season we were all deeply in, I had started seeing someone. We've been on a couple really nice dates. He was lovely, very, very lovely guy. I was like, this is going somewhere interesting. We were on FaceTime planning our next date, like deciding what we were doing. And I said, big mistake on my part. Have you seen this thing on TikTok about the man versus bear?
Hmm.
Just conversational. I was not like, what do you think? Here's what I think. I was just like, have you seen this? Because it was everywhere all the time at that point. He went from 0 to 100 instantly. Started screaming at me. I mean, there was no lead up. I said that. He went straight to, oh, you're one of those, and then just dove in. Within 2 minutes, he had threatened to call his buddies at the RAF and have them find where I live and come over.
Wow.
Like, and I was all, whoa, okay. Like,
Mm.
I just asked you a question. And he was like, so what was interesting to me is that I started backpedaling, trying to figure out how to make him happy so that he would not hurt me.
Because
Like,
of fear?
and I'm sorry, say that again.
Because of fear?
Yeah, because of fear, I went into like, what do I need to say to make this person calm so that he doesn't do anything dangerous,
Mm.
right? And I was so stunned by him, but even more stunned by me, that I didn't just hang up, that I didn't just block him, that I was like, how do I? And I didn't want to continue to see him. I wanted to be safe.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, this doesn't change just because I'm 48 and not 28. Like I'm
Mm.
still my instinct was to go back into an old pattern
Yeah.
and be like, hey, it's okay, babe. I'm just asking a question. Starting to try to soft sell. And he was just raged. I mean, he raged for 10 minutes.
And the interesting thing about that, if I may, is,
Yeah.
I don't know how long was that? Did you say like second date planning?
I think we'd been on 3 dates. We were planning, and our fourth date. It had been over the course of a couple of weeks,
Okay.
right? So
And
it
like
wasn't
imagine if
super
you,
serious. It wasn't, we weren't we weren't
yeah,
in love, right? But we were just like, this is interesting. This is going somewhere, you
yeah.
know?
And the issue, the interesting thing with it is, imagine if it was 2, 3 months in when
Yeah.
feelings started to develop
Yeah.
and you hadn't seen that side.
Yeah.
And a lot of men might hear that and then go, oh, but the same could be said for women. And then we're doing that whole bottle thing again, which is like,
Yeah.
yes, yes. But in this
Yeah.
situation, this is what we've brought and that you're talking about. And that is that, the whole green red light thing, which
Yeah.
was for you, maybe he had a green light above his head for the first 3 dates.
Right.
And because you asked a certain question to see how someone would respond to
Right.
quite an emotionally driven topic,
Right.
that showed you the red.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is what I mean with men, which is, are you going to ask women questions on a date if you're in a heterosexual,
Yeah.
relationship? Are you going to ask women on a date certain questions that will help you see whether the light above them for you is
Yeah.
red or green?
Yeah.
If not, because you're worried about the response,
Mhm.
then you're choosing to put your feelings second, which in that
Right.
situation you shouldn't be doing. You should be
Yeah.
focusing on yourself and what you want in a relationship to the capacity of whether it will be met in the right way
Yeah.
from your potential partner.
Yeah.
But men
Yeah.
don't ask those questions. They want to fall back on, what can I bring to make this, a successful date? How do
Right.
I measure a successful date? Not by emotional intelligence. It's not
Right.
something that they consider.
Yeah. No, totally. And I think what's interesting about what you just said is, I mean, I am a big believer in the statement, I'm not for everyone.
Mm.
Right? Like not everybody's going to want to be my friend, not everybody's going to want to work for me, and not everybody's going to date me, right? Or live with me or partner with me or whatever. And I think that's just true of all of us. But that's an easy place to, like, for me, I can deal with the idea that if someone asks me a charged question to get us to figure out if I have a red flag, if I give them an answer they don't like, well, okay, if it's a red flag, you should say, this isn't going to work out.
Yeah, that's
This
it.
is okay. That's fine.
Yeah, and
Right?
that's the issue, right? Is that if it doesn't work or you don't feel that it works for you,
Yeah.
you can call it there.
Yeah.
You don't have to try and see like, oh, maybe this is just a one-off, and I've heard a lot of women that talk about women who go on dates and they get beige/red flags coming their way, and they just keep, they go
Yeah.
past, they
Flying
don't
past
acknowledge.
them. Going past.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
No.
know
I mean, I know that I've done that in the past as well. And now I probably am too quick to be like, well, that's light green, right? I'm out, right? That's why, like I said, for me, it's like coming back to having these conversations as women, as men, and saying like, hey, you have to know what you want. You have
yeah.
to know what you want. Like what's going to fit in your life. Where can you make concessions? Where can you not?
Mhm.
Right? You have to know yourself pretty well, I think, to your point, to be emotionally ready for a real solid relationship that can actually bring a lot to your life and the other person's, right? So super, super interesting. Yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot in there for sure. Um, and there is some skill in navigating some of this territory and having these conversations. It's super interesting. So what would you say? I'll kind of end us here, kind of as we kind of reach the end. What would you say that you wish the what wish men knew about male friendship? Like what do you wish they knew about having male friendship?
It's difficult on what they wish they knew. I
Or
think that
maybe why they would seek it. Maybe something around that.
Well, I think obviously just people in general, socializing is a huge thing for people.
Yeah.
Well, like not necessarily men or women, but if we're talking about men in general, I think that men like to have a sense of belonging. They like to feel like they've got friends to be able to talk about anything to. I won't keep repeating about what things,
Yeah.
but I think that it is similar to relationships, which is the type of friendships that you're drawn towards. What are the behaviors? That could be based on upbringing, your social environment in terms of location and where you live, people that you meet in nursery slash school, in primary, whatever it might be, and it kind of shapes the similar interests by the people that you hang around with and what you like doing and what you're drawn to.
Yeah.
I think that mental health being something that I think is being more introduced into secondary schools is brilliant.
Yeah.
Even in primary schools, they get, teachers are starting to talk about, feelings and identifying what that looks like, what it feels like, which I think is also fantastic. And I think that that's something that, is being pushed in a way where it's neutral to just both boys and girls,
Hmm.
rather than, oh, you know what? For some reason, I thought that was mine then.
No, it was my cat the whole time. I was like, because Mia is your cat, right?
Yeah.
So mine's Lucy, and I was like, Lucy's gonna make an appearance at some point. I know she will.
Mine won't this morning, but you can
Ah,
guarantee when I go live, she
yeah.
will.
Alex's cat is always in his live. So for those of you who are
Like,
watching,
like a special guest and everything. But yes, I think again with boys, the things that they enjoy, the things they like, sports,
Mhm.
gaming, all those kind of things, quite common. But I think there has to hit a point where again, boys start trying to talk about the things they're going through.
Yeah,
I don't know what stage that is because it's dependent from each person and
yeah,
their experiences.
no,
Um, but then if you were to scrap that back even further, that and also is parenting, which is how are parents allowing their boys to express in the household?
yeah, yeah,
Are we pushing on narratives such as stop crying,
right,
don't cry, it's weak, or come on,
yeah,
stop. And
yeah,
the majority of the reasons, majority of the time, the reason why dads in particular try to put an emphasis on stopping their sons crying is because they feel uncomfortable seeing it.
mm-hmm.
They feel uncomfortable sitting with their son being upset. So it's almost like, I don't like what's going on here, so I'm going to try and get them to stop.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, what that does is it kind of programs or conditions them to believe that those emotions can't be expressed in this house, can't be
right,
expressed around you, can't be expressed in this room.
right,
And it could be for a number of reasons, because it's not safe to do so, because daddy doesn't like that,
yeah,
or because maybe I just shouldn't be doing that, you know?
hmm,
And that these seeds get planted early.
yeah,
I said on
yeah,
my live the other day that my 4 year old has already said a few comments which are typically misogynistic,
yeah,
but he's not a 4 year old misogynist.
right.
He doesn't understand
He
what
doesn't
we
know,
said
right,
is ingrained in that belief system.
right,
So for me, those are the opportunities to challenge.
yeah,
When we go to the charity shop and he goes straight in and he comes back to me and he has a doll and he wants to buy that,
yeah,
am I going to say things like, no, 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 girls play with dolls? Or am I
right,
going to say, okay, let's buy that because you want to play with it?
yeah,
And it's not attaching stereotypes,
right, right,
because he doesn't understand. If you, for example, if you asked him to identify people in his class, he doesn't do it based on their skin color.
right.
He doesn't talk about them like that. He's like, oh, he's the boy.
That's my friend, right? Like,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
play I play on the bars with this one, and this one I read books with, right?
That's right. And
Yeah,
at some point when you get older, depending on who's around you, depending on how people talk and what they say,
yeah,
they will start to pick up on things and be like, is this? Is that?
right,
Because let's be serious, boys and girls still believe in the Tooth Fairy and Santa,
right, right,
so they absorb information because they also can't comprehend that
right,
Santa isn't real at the age of 4. Might
right.
be some really smart, intelligent children out there that do. Um, but
But in general,
that's
no,
kind of
yeah, Yeah.
That's right. So belief systems, upbringing, parenting, how it all
Yeah.
shapes the next generation is important. And I think the more we can encourage dads,
Yeah.
parents of course, but the more we can encourage dads to just be like, listen, if your son is crying, sit there with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sit there with it and show that actually he can cry around you.
Right.
Show that he is someone that can come to you if anything happens, and he's not going to be met with some
Yeah.
resistance.
Yeah.
He's going to be met with love and compassion. And you might think like, I want him to be tough. I want him to, build some resistance to these things that might hurt him. But actually, if in the future you've got him to regulate the emotions to the
Yeah.
point where he's hearing things from people and he's like, okay, this person's just projecting onto me,
Yeah, they're
or
being mean to me, and I don't want it, right?
yeah,
They have
ra-
something,
ra-
they actually have some skill, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
rather than, oh, he's being mean to me, let's get physical.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's
Yeah.
also quite common. That's some, if anybody says anything to you that's,
Put them
does
back.
this or this,
Right.
just knock them out and all this stuff.
Right. Right.
Very common to hear that from a generation ago, maybe,
Yeah. Yeah.
families or from
Totally.
parents.
Totally.
So it's up to us to decide how we want to do that
Yeah.
and see whether or not that makes a positive impact in future relationships with friends, colleagues, parents, family,
Yeah.
all of it. But I think that that kind of awareness now needs to be the shift.
Yeah.
Hopefully with the government helping with educational platforms in areas, but that's something that's not really in our power individually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Starting a family, you do have that power, and
Yeah.
that's such a huge power to know that your boy is going to grow up, and whoever is going to be around him,
Yeah.
that influence you've given him is going to spread.
Yeah. No, I love that.
You know?
I love that idea. I like that you said, like, listen, because I think I know some men who would say, like, well, I tell him to toughen up because I don't want him to get hurt at school. And it's like, maybe if you give him some skills, he won't get hurt at school because he says, yeah, I'm not engaging in this. Right?
That's it.
I'm not going to do this with you. I'm
Learning to
walking
be able to walk
away.
away.
I'm going to go get the teacher. I'm going to, no, I'm not a tattletale, but I'm not going to have a fight with you on the playground, right? Because
Yeah.
that's not interesting to me. So I do think one of the guys I interviewed, my friend Marcus, he said, small kids, small problems, but I want them to know as their problems get bigger, I can hold that space of bigger problems. So I'm trying to work with them on the small problems now. He's like, yeah, sometimes they bring me stuff and I'm like, really? This is what we're talking about, right?
Absolutely.
Because they're little and
Have to go
whatever
through
they
the
tell
motions.
you, yeah, can be so blown out of proportion and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
It's big to
But,
them.
but what they're doing is they are telling you a story of
Yeah.
what is going on in their life,
Yeah.
And if we think about children from, let's just say, the age of 3,
Yeah.
they might have like a muslin little, comfort toy or a
Yeah.
teddy, and it's like you taking that away from them is the equivalent to them taking your phone away as an adult.
Right.
Right, that's gonna, people, let's be serious, a lot of people are addicted to their phones these
Oh, yeah.
days, right?
Yeah.
You do everything on your phone. They don't like, a lot of parents don't realize that actually that is, their world is so small.
Yeah.
They don't understand things like taxes, relationships,
Right.
money. They don't get that concept yet, and how big of an impact that has
Right.
on the world.
Right.
So you taking away something that is a consistent in their world, like a favorite toy,
Mm-hmm.
that is huge. So when they come to you with a story and they're telling you what's happened with their day, and you're sitting there thinking, really? Actually, that's the equivalent to your boss being fired at work
Right.
for them, or
Right.
like your best friend having an affair.
Right.
It's like that is their equivalent. And so
The
for you,
whole
it's like,
world. Yes.
yeah, so it's like, where's the enthusiasm of their story?
Yeah.
Instead, it's like, oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay,
Great. Right.
just tomorrow's a new day. Like,
Yeah.
and again, it's a dismissive tone. You're
Yeah.
almost saying that your stories are not interesting.
Right.
Don't tell me your stories, because this is what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And
But
I get it,
funny.
difficult. I get it. It's difficult to
Yeah.
be like, really? You got
No
pen on
way.
your shirt? Like, wow, what color was it? Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
amazing. Like even you've got pen on your face. How did you do that?
Did you get that on your face? Right. Yeah.
So they want to see that actually what they're bringing to you
I love
is
that.
met with interest,
Yeah.
curiosity.
Yeah. No, I love that. It's so funny because I used to pick my niece up from school when she was little. She's 22 now. And I would sometimes pick her up a series of days in a row because my sister needed me to or whatever. And I would get so involved in her story. I'd be like, well, what did Susan say today? And she's like, oh, we didn't talk about it. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like I would have to remind I would be like, in whatever drama she had told me the day before, I'd be like, what happened with Ashley? Right? And she would be like, well, but what's interesting about that and what I would encourage people, like she's 22 now, and when she runs into problems, she calls me. Right? She calls me and says, I need help out of this situation, or I need to talk about it, or I didn't build that when she turned 20.
No.
I built it when she was 6 and would get in my car and be like 100 miles an hour at whatever had happened that day, right? That's when I built that. I did it with her brothers too, right? And one of them I'm really close to as well, and he still will call me, right? And that's like, he'll tell me what's going on. Sometimes I'm the only
Open.
person he tells, right?
It's openness, and
Yeah,
it was like you say, curiosity from the
yeah,
start.
yeah,
It was like it was basically demonstrating that this space is a space where if I'm in it, you can talk to me.
can say
You
anything.
know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's what I used to, I always told them, you can tell me anything.
Mm.
Like, and I promise that as long as you're not hurting yourself or someone else, I won't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Right? But you can tell me anything, and I think it does. Kids need that. We all need it, right? Like we're
Yeah.
not any different. We need it. So
Well, we need it as adults, but
yeah,
like you just said there, you don't always start at 22 or 30 and think this
right,
is easy to do. If
right,
you can start it earlier, and again, I suppose that's a privilege that I recognize in myself. I had a very comfortable upbringing.
yeah,
You know, I'm an only child, so I had all the attention.
yeah.
Thank you for that.
Good job,
And
mom
then
and
obviously, yeah, yeah, well, yeah, good decision on that one. And then, but if I ever had any issues, mum was always there,
dad.
you know, and I knew, and my grandma as well, extremely close to my grandma,
Yeah,
and you know, having that space to just be who I wanted to be, without being met with any like, don't do this too much. Like at times, it was just mainly around safety, really, you know.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but also I completely acknowledge a different world. You know, back then what I was playing with in terms of toys and everything
Oh my
compared to
God.
what my kids are playing with now and TV and everything, it's like there's actually so much that they are absorbing
Right.
that if anything, it's quite intimidating at times. It's
Yeah.
like, well,
Yeah. I mean, I
you know,
watched a 2-year-old in the at the restaurant the other night pick up a phone and go to YouTube, and I was all, that kid can't even hold a fork, right? Like,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a good one.
I was
They
like,
can't hold a fork, they can hold a phone and manage
I was
that.
like
You're right.
watching it in its little seat, like get its phone, get the mom's phone, do what it needed to do, and I was all, wait, that kid's eating with its fingers and using a phone. I'm confused.
Multitasking at the age of
Yeah,
2.
yeah.
It's brilliant.
So I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming and talking to me. It's been so much fun, and I've enjoyed getting to know you better, but also just hearing kind of your perspective on this. So.
Thank you so much for having me. It was
Yeah.
brilliant. Lovely
If
to
you're
talk to you.
watching, you'll notice that there's a little QR code in the corner, and you can donate to Movember, which again is an organization that raises awareness for men's health, like testicular and prostate cancer, but also men's behavioral and mental health. And they are really working hard on suicide prevention for men as well now. So please feel free to donate, and we'll put a little money in the coffers for men and these issues. So thanks, Alex.
No problem. Take care.